The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Inside its largest chamber, representatives from 47 different alien species gathered for an emergency meeting. The room was enormous, with walls made of crystal that changed colors based on the mood of the speakers. Today, those walls pulsed with shades of red and orange, reflecting the tension that filled the air. The Vorash Dominion had declared war on humanity. This news sent ripples of concern through the assembled aliens, though not because they thought the Vorash would lose. The Vorash were conquerors, pure and simple. In the past 10 years, they had taken control of 12 different star systems. Their military was legendary for its brutality and efficiency. When the Vorash attacked, civilizations fell. It was that simple. The lead military analyst, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms, projected images into the center of the room. These holograms showed the current state of human civilization. The numbers did not look good for humanity. Humans controlled exactly 7 worlds, scattered across a small region of space. Their fleet consisted of 300 ships, which seemed impressive until you compared it to the Vorash armada of 1,500 warships. Humanity had only been traveling between stars for 200 years, making them practically babies in galactic terms. The Vorash ambassador stood to address the council. He was a massive being, nearly 8 feet tall, covered in scales that gleamed like polished metal. His voice was deep and resonant as he spoke. The humans have refused our generous offer to become a client species under Vorash protection. They have chosen destruction instead. Our fleet is already moving into their territory. We estimate complete occupation within 72 hours. A representative from the Catharian species stood up. The Catharians looked almost like humans, but with silver skin and larger eyes. Their homeworld had barely survived a Vorash attack 20 years ago, and they still bore the scars of that conflict. "We must intervene," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We cannot stand by and watch another species be destroyed. The humans have done nothing to deserve this." The council chamber erupted into debate. Some agreed that intervention was necessary. Others argued that the Galactic Council had strict rules about neutrality and territorial disputes. If they broke those rules now, what would stop them from interfering in every conflict across the galaxy? The vote was called, and the result was clear. The Council would not intervene. Humanity would face the Vorash alone. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Sarah Chen studied the incoming reports. The war room was filled with officers and analysts, all of them working frantically to prepare for the impossible battle ahead. Large screens on every wall showed the positions of both fleets, updating in real time as the Vorash armada moved deeper into human space. Sarah was 53 years old, with gray streaking through her black hair. She had served in the Unified Defense Command for 30 years, rising through the ranks during peacetime. Now she faced the greatest military challenge in human history, and everyone in the room knew the odds. 300 ships against 1,500, 7 worlds against an empire that spanned dozens of systems. The math was brutal and unavoidable. A young lieutenant approached her station. "Admiral, we are receiving multiple surrender demands from the Vorash fleet. They are broadcasting on all frequencies. They want an answer within 6 hours, or they will begin orbital bombardment of our colonies." Sarah nodded slowly. She had expected this. The Vorash always offered one chance to surrender before they began killing. It was the only mercy they showed. She looked around the war room at the faces of her officers. These were good people, dedicated professionals who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come. Now it was here, and they were all thinking the same thing. How do you fight an enemy that outnumbers you 5-1? But Sarah knew something that the Vorash did not know. She knew something that the Galactic Council had never suspected. She turned to her communications officer and spoke clearly. "Send the activation codes to all 7 sites. Authorization Chen Alpha 09. Execute the deterrence protocol." The communications officer hesitated for just a moment. Everyone in the room understood what those words meant. The deterrence protocol was humanity's deepest secret, a contingency plan that had existed since the day humans first ventured into space. It was insurance, a final option that every human leader had hoped would never be needed. The officer's hand shook slightly as he entered the codes, but he did not question the order. Across human space, 7 locations received the encrypted transmission simultaneously. These were not military bases or shipyards. They were museums, old buildings that most people had forgotten about. Each museum was dedicated to preserving humanity's violent history, the dark centuries before world peace was achieved. Tourists rarely visited these places anymore. The exhibits were considered depressing reminders of humanity's savage past. On Mars, inside the Olympus War Memorial, an elderly man named Dr. James Okonkwo sat in his small office. He had been the curator of this museum for 27 years. The building was mostly empty these days, with only a handful of visitors each month. When the communication terminal on his desk suddenly activated, displaying authorization codes he had memorized decades ago, his heart sank. James stood slowly, his joints aching with age. He walked through the museum's main gallery, past displays showing ancient weapons from Earth's bloody history. There were rifles from the World Wars, missiles from the Cold War, and drones from the unification conflicts. Each exhibit had a plaque explaining how many people had died from these weapons, how much suffering they had caused. The museum existed to remind humans why peace was precious, why war should always be the last resort. At the back of the museum, behind 3 sets of locked doors, was a vault. James had only opened this vault once before, during a drill 15 years ago. He placed his hand on the security scanner and spoke his authorization code. The vault door, 3 feet thick and made of reinforced titanium, began to open with a deep grinding sound. Inside the vault, lights flickered to life, revealing rows of cylindrical containers. Each container held something that officially did not exist. These were the weapons humanity had developed during their darkest period, technology so dangerous that they had been banned by international treaty. But instead of destroying them, humanity had done something else. They had preserved them, studied them, and improved them in secret, just in case the galaxy turned out to be a dangerous place. James activated the systems inside the vault. Watching as status displays changed from red to green, similar scenes were playing out at 6 other locations across human territory. The old guard was waking up after a long sleep, and the galaxy was about to learn something terrifying about humanity. The peaceful explorers who had joined galactic society 200 years ago were not what they seemed. They were killers who had chosen to be better, and they had never forgotten how to kill. Above Earth, the Vorash fleet moved into position, confident and unchallenged. They had no idea that in museum vaults scattered across human space, weapons beyond their comprehension were powering up. The Vorash had made their final mistake. They had assumed that humanity's restraint came from weakness rather than choice. In a few minutes, they would learn the difference, and that lesson would cost them everything. The Vorash fleet spread across human space like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. Their massive warships moved with practiced precision, each one heading toward a different human colony. The largest concentration of Vorash vessels surrounded Earth, their weapons aimed at the cradle of humanity. On board the flagship, the Vorash Supreme Commander watched his tactical displays with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Back at Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council had opened a live observation feed. Representatives from dozens of species watched the invasion unfold in real time. Many felt genuine sadness for humanity. The humans had been pleasant neighbors, always polite in diplomatic negotiations, eager to learn and share knowledge. It seemed tragic that such a young species would be destroyed before they had a chance to truly flourish in the galactic community. The Catharian ambassador sat in her seat with tears streaming down her silver face. She had visited Earth once years ago and had been impressed by the humans' art and music. She had walked through their cities and seen the monuments they built to peace, the statues commemorating the end of their global conflicts. Now all of that would be destroyed, and she could do nothing to stop it. What none of the council members noticed was the strange behavior of human communications. Every human colony had gone dark simultaneously. No distress calls, no pleas for help, no military chatter between their ships. The 300 human vessels simply floated in space, not fleeing, not attacking, just waiting. The Vorash commander interpreted this as shock and fear. He had seen it before in other species facing their final moments. On Mars, Dr. James Okonkwo stood inside the vault, watching the ancient systems come fully online. The technology before him looked deceptively simple. Smooth metal containers, each about the size of a coffin, lined up in neat rows. But James knew what each one contained. He had spent years studying them, maintaining them, making sure they would work if this day ever came. Now that day was here, and the weight of responsibility felt crushing. He thought about his grandchildren, safe in a shelter beneath the Martian surface. He thought about all the children across human space huddled with their parents, terrified of the alien ships overhead. The Varash were not known for mercy. If they began their bombardment, millions would die in the first hour. The deterrence protocol was designed to prevent that, but at what cost? Similar thoughts troubled the other 6 curators across human territory. On Europa, a woman named Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in her vault, her hand hovering over the activation switch. On Titan, Dr. Robert Kim said a quiet prayer before beginning the launch sequence. These were not soldiers. They were historians and teachers, people who had dedicated their lives to making sure humanity never forgot the horrors of war. Now they were being asked to unleash those horrors one more time. The weapons humanity had locked away were unlike anything the Varash had encountered. During Earth's unification wars, when nation-states fought desperately for survival and dominance, human scientists had pushed beyond every ethical boundary. They had not just developed new weapons. They had weaponized the fundamental forces of reality itself. Physics, biology, time, space, consciousness, everything became a potential instrument of destruction. When humanity finally achieved world peace after centuries of bloodshed, the survivors faced a difficult question. What should they do with these terrible weapons? Some argued for complete destruction, melting down every prototype and burning every blueprint. Others, more cautious, suggested preservation. The galaxy might be peaceful, but it might also be hostile. Better to keep the weapons locked away just in case. The compromise was the deterrence protocol. 7 museums would be built, 1 on each major human world. Publicly, they would educate people about the cost of war. Secretly, they would house humanity's most dangerous military technology, maintained and ready but never deployed. The curators would be carefully chosen individuals, people who understood both the necessity and the horror of what they guarded. For 200 years, the protocol had remained inactive. Humanity had ventured into space, encountered alien civilizations, and joined the Galactic Council. They had been careful to present themselves as peaceful explorers, interested in trade and cultural exchange. Their military was deliberately kept small and defensive. No one suspected that beneath this peaceful exterior lay the capacity for devastating violence. Admiral Chen stood in the war room on Earth, watching the countdown on her primary display. The Vorish had begun their final approach to Earth's orbit. In 10 minutes, they would be in position to begin bombardment. In 12 minutes, they would start firing. She had sent the activation codes 30 minutes ago, which meant the museum systems were now fully operational and awaiting her final command. She turned to face her officers. Every eye in the room was on her, waiting. These people trusted her to make the right decision. The weight of 3 billion human lives rested on her shoulders, along with something even heavier, the burden of unleashing weapons that humanity had sworn to never use again. "We tried peace," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "We asked the Vorash for dialogue. We offered them trade agreements, cultural exchanges, anything to avoid conflict. They chose war. They came to our homes with weapons raised, demanding our surrender or our deaths. We did not start this fight, but we will finish it." She activated her command interface, entering the final authorization codes. Around her, officers did the same, each one adding their verification to the launch sequence. The system required unanimous consent from the entire command staff. Every single person in the room had to agree that this was necessary. One by one, the authorization lights turned green. Across human space, the museum vaults opened completely. Mechanical arms lifted the cylindrical containers, carrying them to launch positions. On Mars, Dr. Okonkwo watched as his vault's ceiling retracted, revealing the red Martian sky and the Varash ships overhead. The containers in his facility were labeled with a simple designation: probability engines. He had spent years trying to understand how they worked, and he still was not entirely sure. Something about quantum mechanics and forcing reality to choose specific outcomes. On Europa, Dr. Martinez's containers were labeled entropy accelerators. These were the weapons that James feared most. They manipulated time itself, specifically the rate at which entropy, decay, and disorder occurred. In the wrong hands, they could age entire worlds to dust in seconds. In controlled deployment, they could make enemy ships collapse from centuries of wear in just moments. The other facilities held equally terrifying devices. Neural cascades that could shut down organic brains, gravitational shears that created and collapsed tiny black holes, reality anchors that locked space and prevented faster-than-light travel, matter disassemblers that could take apart atomic bonds, making solid objects simply cease to exist. Each weapon represented a different way humanity had learned to violate the natural laws of the universe. Admiral Chen's display showed all 7 facilities ready for deployment. She took a deep breath and gave the order that would change galactic history. Release the old guard, all weapons free. Engage at will. In the museums, the containers launched into space, accelerating toward the Vorash fleet with inhuman speed. The Vorash sensors detected the launches immediately, but their computers struggled to classify what they were seeing. The objects were too small to be missiles, too fast to be drones, and they gave off energy signatures that made no sense according to known physics. The Vorash Supreme Commander stared at his tactical display, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. What were these things? Where had they come from? He ordered his ships to defensive positions and prepared point defense systems to shoot down the incoming objects. But something in the back of his mind whispered a warning. Something was very wrong. The humans were not behaving like a defeated species. They were behaving like predators who had been cornered. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council's observation feed showed the strange launches from human territory. The energy readings were off the scale, creating patterns that their best scientists could not explain. The eldest leaned forward in his seat, his ancient eyes narrowing. In his 3 centuries of leading the Council, he had never seen anything like this. Whatever humanity had just deployed, it was technology far beyond what any Council species possessed. The human observer at the Council, a quiet diplomat named Marcus Webb, sat calmly in his corner seat. He had known this day might come eventually. He had been briefed on the deterrence protocol when he accepted his position. Now he watched the confused faces of the alien representatives and felt a deep sadness. Humanity had tried so hard to be different, to leave their violent past behind. The Vorash had given them no choice but to remember who they used to be. The first containers reached their designated positions around the Vorash fleet. Inside each one, ancient weapons that should never have been built prepared to activate. In 60 seconds, the galaxy would witness what happened when humanity removed the chains they had placed on themselves. The Vorash had 7 minutes left to live, though they did not know it yet. The first minute began with silence. The Vorash fleet maintained its formation, weapons locked onto human cities below. Their commanders waited for the point defense systems to destroy whatever the humans had launched. But the small containers from the museums did not behave like missiles or drones. They simply stopped, hovering at precise coordinates throughout the Vorash formation, creating a 3-dimensional grid around the entire fleet. Then the probability engines activated. Reality itself seemed to shudder. On board the Vorash flagship, the Supreme Commander watched his navigation display suddenly show impossible readings. His ship was simultaneously in 3 different locations according to the sensors. No, wait, now it was in 7 locations. The computer systems tried to reconcile the conflicting data and failed, throwing error messages across every screen. But the real horror was not the sensor confusion. The probability engines worked by calculating quantum possibilities, and then forcing reality to collapse into a specific, chosen outcome. Humanity had asked a simple question when they built these weapons. What if we simply chose to win? What if we could force the universe to select the probability where our enemies were exactly where we wanted them to be? Across the Vorash fleet, ships found themselves displaced from their actual positions. A dreadnought that had been in Earth orbit suddenly registered as being inside Earth's moon. 3 cruisers occupying safe distances from each other now occupied the exact same coordinates in space. The physical objects had not moved, but reality's understanding of where they were had been rewritten. Navigation became impossible. Weapons could not lock onto targets. Formation coherence collapsed completely. The second minute brought something worse. The entropy accelerators engaged and time itself became a weapon. These devices created localized fields where entropy, the natural process of decay and disorder, accelerated to impossible rates. Inside these fields, seconds became years. Years became centuries. A Vorash dreadnought that had been built 50 years ago suddenly experienced 5,000 years of aging in 30 seconds. The hull plating, designed to last for decades, corroded and crumbled as if exposed to millennia of cosmic radiation. Power cores that should have functioned for another century reached the end of their operational life and shut down. Structural supports weakened and snapped. Life support systems failed as their components decayed past functionality. The crew did not understand what was happening. They felt their bodies aging, joints stiffening, muscles weakening. The younger crew members suddenly had gray hair and wrinkled skin. The older members simply died of age-related failures, their hearts stopping as decades of wear compressed into moments. 300 Vorash warships simply fell apart, their hulls breaking into pieces, their crews dying of old age before they could even scream. The Galactic Council watched in stunned horror. Their observation feed showed Vorash ships disintegrating for no apparent reason. The energy signatures from the human weapons were unlike anything in their databases. A crystalline collective representative whose species had studied physics for 10,000 years whispered in disbelief. They have weaponized time. That should not be possible. The mathematics alone would require... She stopped, unable to finish the thought. The third minute brought a different kind of horror. The remaining Vorash ships detected a broadcast from the human vessels, which had remained stationary and silent until now. The transmission appeared to be audio, something that sounded almost musical. The Vorash communications officers tried to filter it, assuming it was some kind of psychological warfare tactic. They were right, but they had no idea how effective it would be. The broadcast was not music. It was a neural cascade, a carrier wave designed to exploit fundamental constants in how carbon-based brains process information. During Earth's unification wars, neuroscientists had discovered that consciousness itself could be weaponized. They found patterns that could overwhelm neural pathways, turning the brain's own electrical activity into a destructive force. The patterns in the broadcast were tailored specifically for Vorash brain structure, based on medical scans humanity had collected during diplomatic exchanges. On 400 Vorash ships, crew members suddenly stopped what they were doing. Their eyes went blank. Their limbs stopped responding to conscious control. Inside their skulls, cascading neural feedback loops created catastrophic interference. It was not painful, there was no time for pain. One moment they were conscious, the next moment their higher brain functions simply shut down, leaving them as empty bodies still breathing but no longer thinking. The fourth minute saw the deployment of gravitational shears. These weapons created microscopic artificial singularities, tiny black holes, at targeted points in space. Humanity had learned to weaponize gravity during the Mars Rebellion, when colonists fought Earth forces for independence. The math was simple, but the engineering was nearly impossible. Create a singularity, sustain it for exactly 1 nanosecond, then collapse it before it could grow out of control. The remaining Vorash capital ships detected strange gravitational readings an instant before disaster struck. At the exact center of their power cores, quantum-scale black holes formed. For 1/1000th of a second, these singularities existed, and in that impossible moment they began pulling everything toward them. The ship's cores buckled inward, armor plating compressed, internal structures collapsed. The singularities vanished before they could consume the entire vessels, but the damage was done. The ships imploded, their centers crushed into points of impossible density, then exploded outward as the containment fields ruptured. The Vorash Supreme Commander, his flagship somehow still functional, finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had attacked the most dangerous species in the galaxy, a species that had simply chosen not to demonstrate their capabilities. He reached for his communications panel with shaking hands, intending to order a full retreat. Perhaps if his fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed immediately, some ships could escape this nightmare. The 5th minute made retreat impossible. Reality anchors activated throughout the battle space. These devices locked space-time coordinates, creating zones where the fabric of space-time itself became rigid. Faster-than-light travel required flexibility in space-time, the ability to warp and fold dimensions. The anchors removed that flexibility completely. Vorash ships tried to activate their jump drives and found them non-functional. Not broken, not damaged, simply unable to engage with the fundamental physics required for FTL travel. They were trapped in normal space with humanity's weapons, unable to flee, unable to escape. The survivors could only watch as their fleet continued to die around them. The 6th minute brought the matter disassemblers. These were nanoscale machines, billions of them, each one designed to target atomic bonds and break them. Humanity had originally developed this technology for construction, a way to quickly dismantle asteroids for mining. During the Unification Wars, someone realized that what could dismantle rocks could also dismantle ships and people. The remaining Vorash vessels detected strange particles approaching their hulls. Their sensors could barely register the nanomachines, they were so small. The particles touched the ship's outer armor and began their work. Molecular bonds broke. Atoms that had been locked together in solid structures suddenly found themselves free, drifting apart. The hulls of the ships began to dissolve, not melting or burning, but simply ceasing to exist as matter returned to its constituent elements. Crew members in sections that still had intact walls watched through viewports as reality itself seemed to erase their vessels. A bulkhead would be solid one moment, then translucent the next, then gone, replaced by open space. They could see the dissolution moving toward them, an invisible wave that destroyed everything it touched. Some tried to run. Others simply waited, knowing there was nowhere to go. The 7th minute arrived, and Admiral Chen's voice broadcast on all frequencies. She knew the Galactic Council was listening. She knew every species in the galaxy would hear these words and remember them. Her voice was calm and clear, without anger or triumph, simply stating facts. The Vorash Dominion attacked human territory without provocation. The Vorash Dominion has been removed from our space. Any vessel that powers down its weapons and surrenders in the next 30 seconds will be spared. This is the only offer you will receive. 63 ships remained out of the original 1,500. 63 captains looked at the debris fields around them, looked at the impossible weapons that had destroyed their fleet in 7 minutes, and made the only choice that made sense. Their weapons powered down. Their shields dropped. They surrendered completely and without conditions. Admiral Chen gave the shutdown order. Across human space in 7 museums, the ancient weapons fell silent once more. The probability engines stopped forcing reality to bend. The entropy accelerators released their hold on time. The neural cascades ceased their deadly broadcasts. The gravitational shears collapsed their final singularities. The reality anchors unlocked space-time. The matter disassemblers deactivated and fell dormant. The old guard had awakened just long enough to remind the galaxy what monsters slept in human museums. Now they returned to sleep, having done their terrible work. The war was over. Humanity had won in Sev. The Nexus Prime Chamber remained silent for nearly a full minute after the weapons stopped firing. 47 different species, many of them thousands of years older than humanity, stared at their displays showing the aftermath of the battle. Debris fields floated where the mighty Vorash Armada had been. 63 damaged ships hung motionless in surrender, and the human fleet, all 300 vessels, sat exactly where they had been at the start, having never fired a single conventional weapon. The Catharian ambassador slowly turned her silver head to look at the human observer. Marcus Webb sat quietly in the corner section reserved for junior species, wearing a simple gray suit that looked almost comically ordinary given what had just occurred. He had not moved during the entire battle, had not shown any emotion, had simply watched the displays like everyone else. Now, as dozens of alien eyes fixed upon him, he calmly returned their stares. The eldest, a Jantari who had led the Galactic Council for 3 centuries, finally found his voice. His species lived for millennia and had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. He had thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He had been wrong. His voice, usually calm and measured, shook slightly as he spoke a single word. "Explain." Marcus stood slowly, adjusting his jacket. He looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, seeing fear in faces that had shown only pity for humanity just minutes before. He had prepared for this moment, had rehearsed what he would say, but now the words felt inadequate. How do you explain 2 centuries of deception, even if that deception was intended to keep the peace? 234 years ago, Marcus began, humanity achieved worldwide peace on Earth. This happened after we had spent roughly 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. We fought with sticks and stones, then swords and arrows, then bullets and bombs, and finally with weapons that could crack planets and rewrite reality. We turned warfare into a science of absolute destruction. He paused, letting his words sink in. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Crystalline Collective's representative made a harmonic sound that translated as disbelief. When we finally unified, Marcus continued, when we finally achieved peace across our entire world, We faced a very difficult choice. We had all these weapons, all this knowledge of how to destroy. Some people wanted to erase everything, to forget we had ever been so violent. Others argued that we should preserve our capabilities, just in case the universe turned out to be dangerous. The Varash ambassador, present via quantum link from his homeworld, his scaled face pale with shock, interrupted. You have had these weapons for 200 years? While you pretended to be peaceful explorers? While you smiled and signed treaties? His voice carried equal parts anger and terror. Marcus met his gaze steadily. Yes. We chose to preserve our weapons, locked away in museums with protocols and fail-safes. We hoped we would never need them. We prayed we would never need them. For 2 centuries, we tried to be the peaceful species you thought we were. We wanted to leave our violent past behind, to become something better. A representative from a species called the Mytharians, beings made of living crystal who communicated through light patterns, asked the question many were thinking. Why did you never tell us? Why did you let us believe you were weak? 47 species share information about their military capabilities. It is how we maintain balance and peace. You violated that trust, Marcus sighed. This was the heart of the matter, the question that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy going forward, because we were not the species we used to be. We looked at our history, at what we had done to each other, at the weapons we had created, and we were genuinely horrified. We did not want to be feared. We did not want other species to look at us and see monsters. We wanted to be normal, to be equals, to be friends. He gestured at the tactical displays still showing the debris fields. The Varash Dominion gave us no choice. They came to our worlds with an armada. They demanded our surrender or our destruction. We tried diplomacy. We offered trade, cultural exchange, anything to avoid violence. They refused everything except our complete submission. What would you have us do? Allow them to bombard our cities? Allow them to kill millions of our people? We defended ourselves with the tools we had. The chamber erupted into chaotic debate. Some species called for humanity's immediate expulsion from the council. How could they trust a species capable of such overwhelming violence? Others, particularly those who had suffered under aggressive empires, began to see humanity in a different light. A few representatives even looked relieved, as if humanity's capabilities somehow made the galaxy feel safer. A counselor from the Drachnari species, beings who resembled Earth's dragons, stood to speak. His people had been fighting border disputes with 2 aggressive neighbors for decades. Let me understand this correctly. Humanity possessed weapons that could have conquered the entire galaxy, and instead they asked politely to join our council as equals. They could have demanded tribute, carved out an empire ruled through fear, but they chose diplomacy and cooperation. Marcus nodded. We could have done many things. We chose to try to be better than our history. We chose to lock away our weapons and hope we never needed them again. 7 minutes, that is all it took to end a war your analysts predicted would last weeks. We have had these capabilities throughout our entire time in galactic society. If we wanted an empire, if we wanted to rule others, we would already have done so. The Varash ambassador, his voice barely above a whisper, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What are your intentions now? Will you retaliate against the Dominion homeworld? Will you use your weapons to conquer us? Marcus shook his head firmly. Your fleet violated our territory. Your fleet was destroyed. We consider the matter closed. Assuming the Dominion agrees to leave human space alone from this point forward, we have no interest in conquest or revenge. We just want to be left in peace. The eldest raised his hand, calling for order as the debate threatened to spiral out of control. The human has said much, but he has not addressed the fundamental concern. What guarantee can humanity offer that they will not use these weapons for aggressive purposes? What prevents you from becoming the next great threat to galactic peace? The chamber fell silent, waiting for Marcus's answer. This was the critical moment, the question that would determine whether humanity remained part of galactic civilization or became isolated and feared. The same guarantee we have offered for 200 years, Marcus said quietly. Our word and our actions. We have been part of this council for 2 centuries. In all that time, have we ever threatened another species? Have we ever used our influence to bully smaller civilizations? Have we ever demanded special treatment or privileges? He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as he could. You have seen what we can do now. You know we could have revealed our capabilities at any time and ruled through fear. We did not. We asked to be your equals, not your masters. 7 minutes. That is how long it took us to destroy an armada that your military experts said would defeat us in days. If we wanted an empire, if we wanted dominion over others, do you truly believe you could have stopped us? The bluntness of his words sent a chill through the chamber. He was right, and everyone knew it. Humanity could have revealed their weapons at any point and seized control of the galaxy. They had not. That fact alone spoke louder than any promise. A young representative from the newly admitted Solarian species, who looked almost human but with golden skin, spoke hesitantly. But how can we trust that your restraint will continue? You have shown us your capacity for violence. What if your government changes? What if new leaders decide that conquest is preferable to cooperation? Marcus smiled sadly. That is a fair question, and honestly, you cannot have absolute certainty. But consider this, we have been a spacefaring species for 200 years. Our government has changed many times in that period. Different leaders, different political parties, different philosophies. And yet the deterrence protocol remained sealed. The weapons stayed in their museums. Generation after generation of human leaders chose peace over power. He paused, then added something he had not planned to say. We are also proposing something unprecedented. We want to open our museums to council inspection teams. We want you to see the weapons, to understand what they do, to verify their containment protocols. We want transparency. We want you to know exactly what we are capable of, so you will also know exactly what we are choosing not to do. This proposal caused another wave of shocked murmurs. Species did not reveal their ultimate weapons to potential enemies. It was unthinkable. But Marcus pressed on. Fear breeds suspicion, and suspicion breeds conflict. We do not want you to fear us. We want you to understand us. Yes, we are capable of terrible violence, but we are also capable of choosing restraint, of choosing peace, of choosing to be better than our capacity for destruction. The eldest leaned back in his seat, his ancient eyes studying Marcus with 3 months had passed since the 7-minute war that changed the galaxy. During that time, the universe had reorganized itself around a new reality. Aggressive empires that had been expanding for decades suddenly pulled back their fleets, consolidating around core territories. Border disputes that had simmered for years cooled almost overnight. Species that had been considering military solutions to their problems abruptly discovered a renewed interest in diplomacy and negotiation. The reason was simple. Everyone now understood that humanity was watching, and humanity possessed weapons that made conventional warfare look like children throwing stones. No one wanted to become the next example. The Vorash dominion, once feared across dozens of star systems, had become a cautionary tale told in hushed whispers. 1,500 ships gone in 7 minutes. An entire armada erased by a species everyone had dismissed as weak. Applications for Galactic Council membership had tripled. Smaller species that had previously felt vulnerable now sought the protection of collective security, hoping that association with the Council might shield them from aggression. The unspoken logic was clear. If humanity was part of the Council, and humanity had the most powerful weapons in known space, then perhaps Council membership was the safest place to be. Now the Council reconvened to address what they had officially designated as the human question. Representatives filed into the crystalline chamber with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The session today would determine humanity's place in galactic civilization. Would they remain as members? Would they be expelled as too dangerous? Would new restrictions be placed on their activities? No one knew for certain, though speculation had run wild across diplomatic channels. Admiral Sarah Chen had been requested to appear before the Council personally. She stood in the center of the chamber, still wearing her uniform, looking far more comfortable than Marcus Webb had 3 months ago. Sarah was a military officer, used to difficult situations and hard questions. She had made the decision to release the old guard, and she would face the consequences of that decision without flinching. The eldest began the session by acknowledging the changed circumstances since they had last met. Admiral Chen, you are here because the Council requires clarity regarding humanity's intentions. The weapons you deployed have capabilities that exceed our understanding of physics. Your victory over the Vorash was absolute and terrifying. Many species now fear you. Some respect you. All want to know what comes next, Sarah nodded. I understand your concerns. I will answer any questions you have as honestly as I can. A representative from the Metharian collective spoke first. You deployed weapons of unimaginable power. Are you building more? Are you expanding your military? What is your fleet doing right now? We are returning the old guard to their museums, Sarah answered clearly. We are not building additional weapons of that type. We are not expanding our territory. Our fleet is engaged in exactly the same activities it was before the war: patrol, exploration, scientific survey missions, and maintaining security around our worlds. Nothing has changed except that you now know what we are capable of. The Catharian ambassador asked her question with genuine curiosity rather than fear. But surely you must see the advantage your weapons give you. With that kind of power, you could demand anything from the Council: resources, technology, territory. Who could refuse you? Why are you choosing to remain as you were? Sarah smiled slightly. Because we do not want an empire. We tried that on Earth thousands of years ago. Empires require constant maintenance, constant violence to keep people obedient. They breed resentment and rebellion. We learned that peace is more valuable than power, that cooperation is more sustainable than conquest. We have better things to do with our time than rule over unwilling subjects. A Draknari counselor, his dragon-like features thoughtful, posed a more difficult question. What if another threat emerges? Another species attacks someone else? Will you intervene? Are you positioning yourselves as the galaxy's protectors? This was the question Sarah had been dreading. She took a moment to consider her answer carefully. We are not the galaxy's police force, and we do not want that responsibility. We will defend ourselves if attacked, as we have demonstrated. Whether we would intervene in conflicts not involving us directly would depend on the specific circumstances. We are not making blanket promises to protect everyone, but we are also not saying we would definitely stay neutral. Each situation would be evaluated on its own merits. The eldest nodded slowly. A carefully diplomatic answer. But the reality is that your very existence changes the strategic calculations of every species in the galaxy. Aggressors must now consider whether their actions might draw your attention. That makes you a deterrent even if you take no direct action. Perhaps, Sarah agreed. But that is true of any powerful nation, is it not? The Council itself serves as a deterrent against small-scale conflicts. Our capabilities simply extend that deterrent to larger-scale threats. Is that not beneficial for galactic peace overall? The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued that humanity should be expelled immediately, that any species capable of such violence was fundamentally incompatible with civilized society. Others countered that humanity had already proven their restraint over 2 centuries, and that their capabilities had not changed, only the Council's knowledge of those capabilities. Finally, Marcus Webb stood to make an unexpected announcement. Admiral Chen mentioned returning the old guard to museums. We would like to formalize our earlier offer. Humanity invites the Galactic Council to send inspection teams to all 7 of our weapons storage facilities. You may examine the weapons, review the security protocols, verify the containment systems. We want complete transparency. The chamber erupted in shocked conversation. The Vorash ambassador, participating remotely, spoke with disbelief. You would show us your most powerful weapons? Allow us to study them? This is madness. We would never— He stopped, realizing what he was saying. Exactly, Marcus replied. Most species would never reveal their ultimate military secrets. But we are not most species. We want you to understand what we have, how it works, and most importantly, how carefully we control it. Fear comes from the unknown. We would rather you fear what you know we are choosing not to use, than fear what you imagine we might have hidden. The proposal was radical and unprecedented. After hours of debate, the vote was called. The results were closer than many expected, but ultimately decisive. Humanity would remain in the Galactic Council, but with a designation change. They would no longer be classified as a protected species, the category for newer, less advanced civilizations. Instead, a new category was created specifically for them: Guardian Species. The title was largely symbolic and granted no additional authority or privileges, but it acknowledged the reality that everyone understood. Humanity's capabilities made them different from other council members. They were not rulers or overlords, but their very presence changed the galactic dynamic. The title Guardian was aspirational, a hope that humanity would use their power wisely if they ever chose to use it at all. The vote was not unanimous. 17 species voted against humanity remaining in the council, but 30 species voted in favor, recognizing that excluding humanity would not make them less dangerous, only less engaged with galactic affairs. Better to have them inside the council, bound by diplomatic ties and mutual obligations, than isolated and unpredictable. After the vote, Sarah and Marcus found themselves in a quiet observation lounge on Nexus Prime. Through the massive windows, they could see dozens of ships from different species coming and going, the normal traffic of interstellar commerce and diplomacy continuing as it always had. "Do you think it will last?" Sarah asked quietly. "This new arrangement?" Marcus considered the question while watching a crystalline ship gracefully depart from the station. "I think the galaxy learned something important today. They learned that real strength is not about having power, but about choosing how to use it. Humanity perfected warfare and then chose peace. We developed the ultimate weapons and then locked them away. That kind of restraint is more impressive than any military victory." Sarah nodded, but uncertainty remained in her expression. "The Vorash thought our restraint was weakness. What if others make the same mistake?" "Then they will learn the same lesson," Marcus replied. "But hopefully, they will learn it by watching what happened to the Vorash rather than by experiencing it themselves." 7 minutes, that is all it took to end a war. That is all it took to change galactic politics forever. I think most species are smart enough to do the math. On Mars, Dr. James Okonkwo led a group of Gentari scholars through the Olympus War Memorial. The inspection teams had arrived as promised, representatives from a dozen different species, all eager to see humanity's weapons firsthand. James walked them through each section, explaining not just how the weapons worked, but why they were built, who they were used against, and what horrors they had inflicted on humanity itself before world peace was achieved. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.